And welcome to the Car and Bike Dialogue on NDTV 24/7. I am Siddharth Vinayak Parthankar, and today our topic of discussion on the show is very interesting. It's one that we would not typically visit on a program like this, but one that becomes extremely crucial and very relevant in today's post-COVID world. Protocols and messaging, we are calling it, essentially looking at how the auto industry is communicating and should be communicating both to the outside world and also to itself, its own stakeholders and within each company to make sure that the new protocols and the new messaging is on point with what is happening in the world. Very special panel of guests with a wide array of experience joining me today on the show. Delna Avari is a management consultant with extensive years of experience in the automobile space. Good evening, Delna. We've also got Bharatendu Kabi, who's the head of corporate communications at MotoCorp. Again, a wide experience there with the two-wheeler major that is the market leader. And then Abhay Dange, of course, has years of experience at both Mercedes-Benz and then for a long time now at BMW. He is the director, press and corporate affairs. Good evening, Abhay. So thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to come first to you, Bharatendu. The idea of, having to even think of such a scenario is very unusual. It is also something that none of us saw coming, and yet we find ourselves now coming to grips with it. 3 months ago, things were bad. Nobody knew what was happening. But now, do you think that we finally sort of got to a place where there is a better understanding of how each corporate should be stepping out in this scenario?
Siddharth, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the panel discussion. As you rightly said, this is possibly for the first time that you are hosting a panel discussion on the effectiveness of communication on car and bike. So that itself shows how times have changed. As you know, communication and communicators have always played a very critical role in any organization, big or small. What COVID-19 has done is to amplify the role of communication and communicators in the current situation. There are reasons for that. This is the first time that possibly the most of the population, global population, is at one place, which is their home, which is why communicating with each other, staying connected with each other becomes all the more important, because everybody is in their respective homes. You cannot meet each other physically, and yet you have to stay connected. You have to spread positivity. You have to boost each other's moral. You have to create an environment of motivation and continuity. So I think at a time like this, the messaging itself also has to be effective, very focused. You have to send out a message of compassion, care, and at the same time, continuity of your business imperatives. If you allow me to just quickly give you an example of what we've been doing at Hero MotoCorp, our chairman, Dr. Pawan Munjal, as you know, has already addressed nearly 3 dozen digital town halls over the past 3 months. Now, if you look at the sheer numbers, it's huge. What it has done is that it has brought all of us at Hero MotoCorp together, and multiple stakeholder groups, employees and their families, dealers, distributor partners, supply chain partners, global distributors, investors. So the entire ecosystem, what he has, and these are not one-way traffic, these are all interactive. So he speaks to the employees, their families. This is an exchange of experiences because everybody is working from home. So how the changed environment has become. So this is why I just gave you the example to drive home the effect that a focused messaging and communication how it can create positivity, spread positivity all around.
No, and it's very crucial and vital at these times, no doubt. And I'm sure your employees all appreciate this, as well as the other stakeholders that you mentioned. Abhay, to you next. The fact that we have to look at these new protocols, the fact that whether it is connecting through Skype, Zoom, doing town halls, all of this was always done more at a PR level, really, whether it was internal PR or external. Today, the fact that it has an HR sort of a tonality to it Do you think that that is something that was difficult to come to grips with? And how quickly did you have to sort of adapt yourself, your team, and also your colleagues to all of this?
Right. So our focus entirely has been on people rather. First, actually, our focus was completely on our employees, which is at the headquarters and at our plant Chennai. Then, of course, we were quite concerned about people who are at our dealerships, that we are talking about customers, and eventually suppliers and the society at large. So our focus was basically reinforcing confidence in everyone. Predominantly, of course, being safe, the first and utmost importance. And second was then ensuring business continuity in a completely new way that we have never experienced before in our lifetime. Business continuity meant working from home for a lot of people, operations which involve actually being on ground, where you could not really, let's say, for example, in terms of actually producing cars contribute, but something in terms of readiness, in terms of business readiness, that when things really take a shape around, we are ready there and on the trigger. That was our utmost priority. That's what we do. So throughout our entire ecosystem, our focus has been on people and restoring that confidence in terms of safety and in terms of security.
All right, Delna, to you next. This whole aspect of preparedness. I mean, we heard that straight away at the end of March. We heard it through April, and of course, the lockdown was still very much in effect at the time. Production hadn't begun, supplies hadn't begun, and certainly retail channels hadn't opened up. In that sort of scenario, there was also a lot of urgency to sort of get to that point, right? So when the gates did open, there was some criticism that came from people, especially on social media, and I accept that's not a great barometer. Is this the right time to be selling cars and bikes? Is this the time you want to go out and sort of open things up and start talking about business? It was a tight to walk, wasn't it, for the industry as you look at it from the outside?
Right. So absolutely, it is.
Yeah. Sorry, please. Siddharth, your voice cut at the bit. Go ahead.
All right, Delna. I don't know how much of my question you heard, but the tightrope walk that the industry had to walk, basically about being balanced production requirements and opening business up and yet being sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the fact of the matter remains that this is something that nobody was prepared for. We've all talked about that, right? But the fact of the matter is that we've had time to understand, and business has to continue. The balance is about how you communicate as a brand, and brands are not built overnight. You've got to be consistent, you've got to be authentic. I think the people who kind of faced criticism were the ones who were very opportunistic and tactical, and that's not the way to communicate. I have often said that this industry is very resilient. It is an industry that will bounce back, but it's having a low point at this point. You do need to balance the fact that we, as an industry, employ a lot of people. We have a very large ecosystem of players, whether it's suppliers, dealers, employees, as well as the final consumer. And the reality is that personal mobility as a need is here to stay. So your communication has to be overall in the space that your brand stands for. If you start getting too tactical or opportunistic, you will face certain pushback. But the fact of the matter remains, if you don't communicate in this environment, it's even worse. So I would say the balance of communicating authentically in the space of your brand is extremely important. Assuaging the feelings of your entire ecosystem, whether it's your dealer partners, your suppliers, your employees, is very important. And then communicating with your customer in the language that the customer wants to hear is equally important. So it's about actually, it is a tightrope walk, undoubtedly, but you can't say that you don't do it. You have to do it.
So tell me this then, how do you, when you look for that balance, and it's tricky, like you said, what should be that first thing that people really want to hear? Is it the fact that, hey, we are open for business? Is it the fact that, we'll take care of your fears in terms of making sure that everything that any kind of point of contact is a safe point of contact? Or is it the fact that we have the kind of products that you're now going to be looking for? Delna, this is to you.
Right? Yeah, it's all of it. Because see, one of the things that I have often talked about with a lot of my clients in various industries is the same thing, right? That something like this gets very different reactions from consumers, right? So at one end, you'll have consumers who are extremely disciplined, social distance, wear the mask, very bothered about all of it. And, and then at the other extreme, you'll have people who say, oh, this is all a scam, or I don't care, I'm not going to fall sick. And as a company, you need to, as a brand, be in a position to manage both these feelings of consumers. And this kind of a feeling doesn't just exist in your consumer, it exists in your employee, it exists in you yourself as you're communicating. So for you, it's extremely important as a brand to have a very clear communication strategy and be very clear what you want to say. Now, undoubtedly, you have to talk about the fact that you've taken certain precautions in terms of safety and security. It's right up front. It's top of the mind. So if you do not address that, everything else is not really heard, right? So you have to address that issue, but you can't become all about that. Because then that's just not authentic, right? So you need to be clear that this is what my brand stands for. This is my brand tone and language. But there is a reality that's existing and there is a reaction that consumers are going to have to it. That reaction is going to differ. It's going to be different degrees. So how do I train my people and how do I keep a consistent messaging in that space? I think is far more important than just messaging for the sake of messaging.
Yeah, I think I totally understand what you're saying, and it resonates with me. Abhay, back to you then. The whole point, and I know when I say this that a lot of this has already changed in the last few years. So accepting that, a lot of times, a lot of brands, and this is not about your brand, but in the industry in general, different departments tend to work in their own little silos, right? But now when it comes to this talk of messaging, the fact that whether it's advertising, whether it's social media, whether it is a brand campaign, or whether it is just something that you're going to be communicating to even the press, that tonality has to be very carefully watched. How much do you say that these different departments now integrate with each other in making sure that there is a consistency of message?
Right. So if we look at earlier how we operated, there were a lot of protocols within typical organizations. We could not use social media within the organization in terms of operating. In terms of technology, there were restrictions, or others say there were firewalls within which we needed to operate. But what changed rather radically is that all of a sudden those firewalls collapsed. We had to communicate, we had to network, we had to reinforce that confidence within the people. And that's where we saw, first of all, people coming together and technology enabling that rather. In terms of whether it is internal or whether it is external, we have seen collaboration which is rather unprecedented rather than from the past. Whether it was even communicating with the media. Media, for example, today is communicating a lot more on social media, whether it is the publication itself or whether it's a journalist itself. And what we see also within the organization also, we of course had our intranets, our apps, but we started using social media in terms of WhatsApp rather for groups, which typically were not allowed within the firewall. But we started using systems, and basically it has brought a lot of people closer. If you look at how the brand really reflects, it's also bringing customers closer. And within the whole ecosystem, if we see rather that warmth that is coming via people, that's rather which has taken precedence. Yes, business will follow. We will eventually see that once the bounce back happens. As we see in other markets eventually, that will happen in India also.
Bharatendu, the point about the time when the lockdown was on, there was of course a lot of, I'm sure you had a lot of requests from media for management to be speaking with them, and a lot of that was negative news. Talk about how many days of production loss there's been, what sort of hit on the bottom line the company is going to take, and even when the sales did start, how meager they are on a year-on-year basis compared to last year. When it is only mostly negative news, How do you handle the press?
Siddharth, let me answer your question in this way. I heard one of the viewpoint that, one has to walk a fine rope, a thin line while communicating at a time like this. Let me tell you that, once organizationally, you take a call what your priority is. And let me give you one example. And I quote my chairman, Dr. Pawan Munjal, on this. In one of the town halls, he said, it's people first at Hero MotoCorp. Priority, top 3 priorities. Priority number 1, people. Priority number 2, people. Priority number 3, people. So it's people first. Their health, safety, and well-being takes top priority. Once you decide that, then I think you absolutely know what your messaging is going to be, how, and then you can focus on that particular message. Coming to communicating with the media, Siddharth, and you know it very well, the month of April and May, there was disruption all around. Obviously, you will get queries from the media and you have to stay responsive. However, everybody knows what was happening globally and not just in industry, elsewhere also. The entire world was working from home and there was disruption all around. So at a time like this, you have to take a strategic call. What is it that you are going to communicate beyond what is already known? That is where I think your messaging has to be socially responsible. You have to take a call what I am going to speak to, what language I am going to speak to, what is my tonality for the world at large. Because you know it that today, if I'm responding to a particular media query or I'm talking to a journalist, etc., the messaging goes all out. I mean, the entire ecosystem gets to read it, entire ecosystem gets to see it. It has to be socially responsible. And that is where I think, the role of a communicator comes in. And
all right. And becomes more relevant for the organization as well.
Allow me just half a second more. I'm saying that is why it is very paramount that you put those protocols in place where there is a single window communication, which is ideally communicating the organization's stand, the organization's point of view on that particular subject.
Absolutely. And we saw a lot of brands actually just closing off to the media, which was also not healthy, as Delna has already pointed out. Bharatendu, very quickly, I want to tell you your number 1 fan, Malo, is watching. He wants you to know. I want to quickly now look forward to what comes next in terms of as sales start to, normalize, as people start to take test drives and, buy vehicles again in bigger numbers than what they're already doing. How important is it to keep some of this in mind? Because complacency can be perhaps the biggest enemy here.
Absolutely. And, Siddharth, this is an industry that somehow has been a lot slower in adopting technology, which kind of enables interactions between customers, right? Customer and the dealer. And I think this is the point in time when you should open up and adopt a lot more of the plug-and-play technology that's available, right? And actually map your entire consumer journey, make it more just map it again, right? A more seamless, convenient, contactless experience is needed, and you've got an opportunity to reset it at this point in time. This is an opportunity where you can take the time to fix the very things that haven't been working for you. You don't need those gigantic structures. You don't need the kind of high capital costs that you have. You've got to rethink about your throughput. So even when you're communicating, just map your entire journey and then start communicating authentically to your consumers, right? And I would say that's really, for me, the starting point. You've got the opportunity to reset. You've got the opportunity to adopt new technology to interact with your consumers. Use it. Take this time to do that. We can't keep saying contactless and then not do anything about it. It's not about tokenism. We've been doing experiments in 2011, 12, make it a live part of your actual buying process and buying journey and communication as well.
Yeah, that's very valid. And I think, Abhay, I know that we've seen a lot of communication from BMW India in particular about this whole contactless part of the journey. Everything is going more digital for sure. Do you think it's kind of easier for you to implement that as a premium brand, or am I making that too light of a point?
Right. So, the future is definitely digital. That's what we always believe. It just enhanced the scale with which we went digital rather. Before there was digital experience, but it was with physical contact. Now basically everything went contactless. The entire ecosystem went basically contactless, and it's got replaced with digital. I would say interface with such a scale, which is I would say fast forwarded us into the next level. When we talked about the entire ecosystem, and it was previously when we talked to your business owner, from a lead generation till in terms of
all right. I'm going to quickly just take that point across to Bharatendu. I made the point about how perhaps it's that much easier for a premium brand because your consumer is already that much more plugged in. But Bharatendu, do you think it becomes tougher for a mass brand, and especially in the two-wheeler space?
Siddharth, actually, you will be surprised to see the extent of digitalization which customers across the country are taking to in this current situation. Digitalization has always been a very big priority at Hero MotoCorp, and of course, as you know, historically, every big crisis expedites the growth of technology by a few years, if not decades. And
seen the acceleration right now
happening all across the world, as you can see. I'm sure you would have seen the new platform that we have launched called ESOP, which is a very integrated, very innovative digital platform for customers, for their buying experience, etc. So digitalization is very big in terms of our outreach towards the customer.
Responding to that digitalization?
I missed you, Siddharth.
No, I was trying to make the point about customers actually reacting and responding to this digitalization.
Yes, they are. And that is why I started off my answer to your question by saying that you would actually be surprised how quickly people have adapted to the digital platform.
It is amazing. No, you're right. It is amazing. And we have seen that resilience even from the consumer. No doubt, one of the things which I've heard on literally every episode of the Car and Bike Dialogues is about how resilient the auto industry is. And it's proving that in these days that we've been living through, and indeed in the days to come. We are out of time. It always happens on these shows when we're talking about stuff that's very close to our hearts. Thank you all for joining us today. And I really do appreciate your time, your comments, and also the points that you made.